Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. Hello and welcome to the webinar, How Porterville Transit is Using EVs to Improve its Shuttle Services, co-hosted by ACT News and California's three major electric utilities, PG&E, SCE, and SDG&E. My name is Jason Groves, and I'm the Business Development Senior Specialist in Transportation Electrification here at SoCal Edison, and I'm looking forward to moderating the webinar today. Transit agencies around the country are beginning to test electric vehicles in their fleets, with some designing creative programs to assess their viability. The city of Porterville, California, took a fleet of battery electric vans and created a new on-demand curb-to-curb ride-hailing service for its residents. With a dozen zero-emissions Lightning eMotors electric transit vans, Porterville Transit is proving the viability and versatility of electric vehicles, while also advancing a charging infrastructure which is accessible to the public with the help of SCE. In addition to our presentations, each utility will be hosting separate Teams Q&A sessions right after the webinar from 10 a.m. to 11:30 to discuss any questions you have about their specific EV rate programs. We will include links to these sessions in the chat box. Now, please welcome our speakers. We have Tim Reeser, CEO and co-founder of Lightning eMotors, Richard Tree, Executive Director of Tulare County Regional Transit Agency, Tim O'Neill, Account Executive with Pacific Gas and Electric, and Lianna Rios, Clean Transportation Customer Solutions Manager of San Diego Gas and Electric. Hey, everyone.
Good morning, everyone.
Now, before we get rolling, here's just a few things to keep in mind as we go through each presentation. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so I encourage you to submit questions by using the Q&A box located in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Please direct your questions to the organizer. Some of the information that will be shared today is technical, so if you'd like to watch it again, the webinar recording will be sent out by the end of the week. At the end of the webinar, before closing your browser, we kindly ask that you complete our quick 30-second survey. Your feedback is truly appreciated. And for any technical issues and assistance during the webinar, please contact Benjamin Chan at G&A using the email address that you can see on screen. All right, and I think we're ready to go. Now I would like to present Tim Reeser, CEO and co-founder of Lightning eMotors. Tim, take it away.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate it very much. So we'll go to the next slide here. I think I like to start every time with what we're all here for and kind of what we're doing. And I think all of us take a responsibility for the health in our communities. That has certainly become something all of us need to be thinking about. The picture on your screen is actually not LA or San Francisco. It's actually Istanbul one day when I was there not long ago. And I can assure you that the fog there you see is not fog, it's smog. I live in Denver, Colorado, so I'm very accustomed to the brown cloud here as well. So take it very seriously, and all of us know family members or other people who have asthma, people who've suffered from health problems, and now with COVID, it's become a very direct link between air quality and health. So I look at this problem as not just the fact that, yes, there's 17 million tons of CO2 per year that we're working to get rid of and everything that happens with greenhouse gas, but also really looking at the importance of human health. And I think the responsibility each of us can play in solving some of the human health that's caused by transportation in the United States and worldwide. So if we go to the next slide here. I particularly like this slide because those are the vehicles, some of the vehicles we're talking about today. So those are City of Porterville's vans you see there. And I think when you really look at what Richard Tree and his team have achieved here, it's quite extraordinary in the sense that it isn't just about air quality. It's not just about CO2 and sustainability. They've also made some very significant other impacts to the community, things like dramatic noise reduction, not only for the passengers that find it much more comfortable to sit and either in quiet or on the phone or whatever else they might do in the van, but also for the people around it. When you're on the curb, there's no smoke, there's no noise. So obviously air quality and human health that I talked to a lot about, reductions in CO2 and climate change. All of these vehicles are zero emission vehicles at the tailpipe. There's nothing coming out of the tailpipe. And finally, then something else that Richard and I think the utilities can talk about is the control and the optionality around that they have around where the energy comes from, when they charge, how they charge, and the source of that charging energy and the cost of that energy. So all of those are key benefits that they see today. They're not speculative. They're not things we hope happens with electrification. They are reality today. Next slide. So specific to what Lightning does, Lightning today is a commercial zero emission vehicle manufacturer, or ZEV. We manufacture complete vehicles, class 3 to 7 trucks and buses, offering both battery and fuel cell. Now what you see today are all battery electric vehicles. We also offer fuel cell that the base powertrain is the same. We focus both, in some cases we sell directly to end customers, and in some cases we sell through dealers, or we sell through upfitters. So if you think about the city of Porterville vehicles, these I believe came from an upfitter in Northern California who put in the customized aspects of these vehicles, such as wheelchair lifts and other interior upfits to make them a highly useful product specific for what they're doing. I think we see that as very important, but also unique to these vehicles. We focus on commercial vehicles, which means we care about uptime. We understand the importance of uptime, and certainly no one's perfect in the business. Even the gasoline vehicles, as we all know, aren't 100% uptime. But this is something we're very focused on, continuing to add staff, add people, add service partners to ensure we can meet our customer requirements as far as uptime, and something that from a service standpoint, we are committed to and believe we will continue to improve. And I'm committed as CEO to making sure we continue to add resources and be very good at a high touch, high support model for our commercial vehicle customers. A few things that enable that. We are the analytics and telematics leader. So every one of the vehicles we provide has full telematics and analytics. This provides a few things. One, it provides the customer and us at our network operations center full immediate information about the vehicle. We know, for example, if you hit a pothole and tear a water line, we get an immediate notification to our core group here, to the network operations center, that we've had a drop in pressure across the electric water pump, and we're able to contact the customer and or the dealer and or service center and say, hey, we've that vehicle should be grounded when it gets back to depot. So we have a lot of insight on these vehicles preemptively, which is an exciting place and something that, again, in the traditional ICE vehicle wasn't really available. But the other thing it provides you is a lot of information about where the vehicle is, what the vehicle's doing, the efficiency of the vehicle, which is important as we think about how do you scale this up, and as we work with Richard and his other teams as they look at how do you scale, where do you scale, what's the impact of hotter weather, can you, how many stops can you get, what's the impact of the wheelchair lift on the battery and range, what is the impact on colder weather, what's the impact if we run the air conditioner more or run it less, or the heater more or less. We have that deep detail information to provide you as the customers. And the third thing you get from this analytics and telematics is very deep information about the amount of energy used, which is helpful in terms of LCFS, credit monetization, as well as close work with the utilities in terms of really sizing chargers correctly, sizing the number of chargers, the place of chargers, and again, really being able to understand what the efficiency is and the energy use of these vehicles. In addition to telematics and analytics, we provide charging and full charging solutions. Again, working closely with the utilities. Charging, I think many people think of it a bit as a commodity, but I think Richard and the utilities would all say it takes more thought than that, just as historically fueling has always taken more thought. Most fleets, obviously, that we take it for granted, but the amount of time that's historically had to go into planning fueling, and whether it's the time spent fueling the vehicles, whether it's the planning spent on acquisition of the fuel, whether it's at a retail gas station or a fuel tank on site, all of those have always taken time and energy and input, and they still do today, but it's a different skill set and something we are in business to help our customers with, and work very closely with the utilities to make it easy and enable the customers to have success with it. Finally, we do offer, for those customers that want it and need it, a variety of financing options very inexpensively. In the case of many public organizations, the financing is very inexpensive because of the availability of municipal bonds, et cetera. But across the board, an important aspect for many customers today is financing. Next slide. So one of the other questions I get a lot is, hey, everybody's doing electrification. Ford's, announced their e-Transit. It looks easy. Why would somebody go with Lightning? And I think part of it is when you look at the circle of vehicles, and in fact, when you look at these Porterville vehicles, it's a bit subtle, but these are not stock vehicles. They have unique seating. They have wheelchair lifts. And in fact, Ford does not support any of those things on one of their future e-Transits. They don't support seats at all. They're only cargo vehicles. They don't support a wheelchair lift. They don't support rear HVAC and specialized air conditioning. That's what Lightning does, and that's our business today, is being able to enable things like what we're talking about today, where you've got a very specialized vehicle. And again, important to note, no one else today has a Class 3 fully electric passenger vehicle that supports wheelchair lifts. That's something that's important to everybody and unique to us. And going forward, that Ford has said they won't support those things. That's not in their list because it is unique. It does require being able to move the batteries around. It requires changing the wiring harness, the high voltage wiring harnesses, all those things that are somewhat complex. And yes, in the gasoline and ICE engine, they were easily supported by the big OEMs, but they're much more difficult in an electrification world, and that's where Lightning comes in. Next slide. In addition to what you see in terms of the buses, you see we support a very wide number of OEM products. Ford, GM, we now will soon announce a Hino option as well. We do repowers on transit buses as well, and motor coaches both. And that full line in the bus space of E-Series and F-Series trucks and buses. Next slide. A lot of people have talked about what they're going to do, but I think it's important to note it takes a while to get ramped up. And so we started ramping up this business 4 years ago. And so today we have a mature manufacturing facility. We've got 230 square feet of manufacturing space in a 1 million square foot campus. So we're ready to scale. Today have orders for over 1,600 vehicles. So we are quickly scaling. A very exciting place to be in an industry that understands the need and the opportunity, and in a place where these vehicles now have a very compelling return on investment that we'll talk about in just a moment. Next slide. A little bit more about the manufacturing facility, a fun picture. This was one of my favorite pictures. Those are actually the city of Porterville vehicles when they were being manufactured at our facility. In my opinion, very attractive vehicles. I like them a lot, but a very elegant solution for these vehicles in the way they're electrified. And you can see them coming down the assembly line in our plant last year when these were being made. Next slide. Why are people doing electrification? We've talked a little bit about the environmental side and the sustainability side, but I think most of you on the phone know there's a real strong regulatory drive. When you think about zero emission vehicle zones in London and now in Santa Monica, that we think will spring up, we know will spring up all over the United States that require zero emission zones. In London today, there's a £100 per day, it's about $120 per day penalty to not have a zero emission vehicle if you want to drive in the zone. So it's a very strong incentive, and I think we'll see more of those kind of opportunities pop up in cities worldwide, and we're definitely seeing it being discussed. But obviously we know about California's targets across the broad range, but New York's now putting those targets in place, Colorado, many other states. There's 13 states that have joined California's targets. So we see a very fast regulatory environment changing. And many of the original dates where you see there, the advanced clean truck was by 2045. We see people now talking about moving that date to 2030. So these dates are going to get more aggressive, and it's very important that we jump on board before you have to retire vehicles right after you bought them. So an important time to be looking at regulation, important time to be thinking about corporate mandates. As most of you know, Amazon, IKEA, BP, Microsoft, DHL, Google, Walmart, others have all announced very significant and focused corporate mandates, and we're seeing them from our side begin to implement on those and make the investments to meet them. And of course, we've talked a lot, and everybody knows, some of the grants, whether we're talking about HVIP in California or whether we're talking about Federal Transit Authority, there's a lot of grants. But I think the thing I'm most excited about is really a statement here in the remaining time I have left that you don't need any of that to make it compelling. As we go to the next slide, what we actually find with electrification is, well, let me talk about a few other things real quick. We are Buy America and Buy American compliant on these vehicles. Next slide. And a little bit on our analytics and telematics and the kind of reports you get as you see this page. Full exact efficiency, how many kilowatts you're burning, how much time is spent sitting versus driving, how much time is spent and power is spent on each of the ancillary equipment like the wheelchair lifts and the heating and ventilation and air conditioning systems. Next slide. And then a little bit about charging, which we've talked about. Next slide. And finally, here I get to where I was going. Why would you, as you look at total cost of ownership, and I said, what are the compelling reasons? Yes, we've got the government telling us to do it. Yes, we've got sustainability mandates that our corporations and investors are saying to do it, and our customers are saying to do it. But now finally, we have a real solid total cost of ownership. When you look at these vehicles, to give an idea of efficiency, and this one I hope I can leave with you of any numbers I leave with you, these transit vans are certified on CARB's dyno, on the dyno where we got certified for these vehicles at 66 miles per gallon equivalent. 66 miles per gallon equivalent. As a gasoline vehicle, you're typically getting 12 to 13 miles per gallon, maybe 14 in these vehicles. So 4 to 5 times more efficient, 4 to 5 times more fundamentally efficient. And that means your fuel costs are lower. Even as you look at maybe gasoline is about the same price as electricity in a per energy or BTU basis, it's still dramatically cheaper to run the vehicle because it is 4 to 5 times more efficient in the way it operates. So obviously a few other things that are big: brake costs because of brake regen. Your brakes changes are about 1/5 as often. Again, 1/5 as often. And we know in these commercial vehicles, brakes are expensive. And not only are they expensive, but you lose a day or 2 or 3 of downtime while that vehicle is getting its brakes replaced. So no longer do you lose that downtime, and you get the money back you spent on brakes, and as well as the environmental aspect of the asbestos and other dust that comes off the brakes. Oil changes, inspections, again, to think about is not only do you not have to spend the money on an oil change, you also don't have a day lost of revenue or a day of out there. So finally, as we look at coming down to the final time, I want you to see how it looks in a spreadsheet. And the bottom line is you see most transit agencies, this one's based on 3,500 miles a month. You can see, you can scale that down. Even if you get down to 2,000, 1,500 miles a month, you're still saving money, but a very dramatic savings in, even though the vehicle itself is more expensive, very dramatic savings in what it actually means to you as a transit agency. So even without all the benefits of, even without looking at sustainability, and even without looking at CO2 reductions, and even without looking at all of the health benefits, these vehicles now today save customers money, and that's one of the most exciting things here. So I think with that, I've gone my time, and on to the next presenter.
Thanks for that, Tim. And now we'll move on to Richard Tree, Executive Director of Tulare County Regional Transit Agency. The floor is yours, Richard.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Tim, for the introduction. Exciting stuff about the Lightning eMotors, and what a cool webinar that we have today. Tim just talked about the reduced total cost of ownership for electric vehicles. We have the utility providers going to be talking about their exciting programs to help agencies adopt electric vehicles. And I get today to talk to all of you about why we did it and how we did it. And hopefully it's interesting to you. So good morning to, we've got close to 160 participants today, so pretty cool. Let's jump right into it. So next slide. Again, my name is Richard Tree. I'm the Executive Director of the Tulare County Regional Transit Agency, and the City of Porterville is one of 5 transit systems our agency manages. The on-demand demonstration in Porterville was designed actually to disrupt the traditional and underperforming public transportation model by providing clean and innovative mobility to the community of Porterville, which is about 70,000 residents. The focus on providing clean public transportation is actually particularly important, and it hits close to home since I live in Porterville. We're located in the central San Joaquin Valley of California, which is ranked in the top 3 for the worst air quality in the nation. So that's a big reason. And next slide. The city of Porterville has a goal to convert its entire fleet by 2024. We really have, or the city of Porterville has been an early adopter of battery electric vehicles. Since 2020, the Porterville has been operating 10 40-foot battery electric transit buses that's supported by 10 200 kilowatt DC fast charging stations located at its bus yard. Next slide. And those were some pictures of our battery electric buses and charging station. The city of Porterville's on-demand service, branded as Transport, was born out of a desire to bring clean and innovative mobility to the community through a menu of micro-mobility services in a single mobile application. The concept of mobility as a service would include not only improved rideshare service, but also electric bike and scooters, and eventually car sharing. That's a lot to do all in once. That's our vision for transport in the future. We had to start somewhere, so we focused our early efforts on an improved and innovative shared ride service. In 2020, we replaced 3 underperforming fixed routes with Transport in an innovative and on-demand ride-sharing service. And even during the pandemic, the community responded to the new service better than our modeling and simulations had estimated. Ridership exploded from 500 trips the first month to averaging 3,500 trips each month for the duration of the 1-year pilot. Next slide. But after operating on this innovative on-demand service, we wanted to take it to the next level. We reached out to our community and they wanted some improvements. We were operating gasoline-powered minivans that first year. Why Tim showed some behind-the-scenes pictures of our vans being made. How cool is that? I haven't seen that before. But we started to develop new strategies for success. And we used the what if concept. We didn't know, we just were going to say, what if we started to develop new strategies for success that will improve transport service? What if we increase capacity and reliability of transport? So looking at our minivans and seeing what's out there in the market today, we saw the Lightning eMotor for transit, and with all of the customizations that Tim talked about, partnering with NorCal Vans to have extended high roof to make it easy to get in the vehicle. All of the vans are wheelchair accessible, and some additional features. What if we expand our low carbon fuel standard program that we had started with our compressed natural gas and then move to the electric 40-foot transit buses? Now, how do we maximize LCF credits here in California with deployment of these shuttle vans to reduce operating costs, to generate additional revenue for the transit program, and to improve the environment, which is probably the city's #1 goal? What if we take advantage of current incentives to reduce the cost of the vehicles? I'll be talking about that here in just a little bit, and maximize opportunities with our utility provider to construct the required charging infrastructure. What if we intensify EV adoption by opening up our charging stations to other fleets? And the picture that you see there is our local school district purchased 6 battery electric school buses, but they didn't have the infrastructure ready to charge them. So we opened that up. What if we decentralize, and that's a new concept, is decentralize our charging stations to provide opportunity charging throughout our service area, and which will reduce the need to deadhead back to the bus yard, thus reducing operational costs and keeping those vehicles in the service area and operating efficiently. And then last, what if we sprinkle that map with the decentralized charging stations to support our growing fleet of electric shuttle vans, but also support the public and private vehicles that are coming in and out of our community? Next slide. So I talked about that we operated the first 12 months with a gasoline-powered minivan. We generated a lot of information on how the on-demand service was operating, but we also have a really neat comparison. Tim talked about the miles per gallon equivalent. He had said that on the CARB test bench, they had 60 mile per gallon equivalent, and in real life, operating under a hot temperature, we actually were receiving 53 miles per gallon equivalent. Pretty interesting. We didn't talk beforehand. I just took our raw data and put it in there. Taking advantage of low carbon fuel standard credit revenue, and with the waiver of demand charges that provided by our utility provider, we're actually generating revenue by operating these vehicles rather than paying $4 a gallon currently here in Porterville. And all of that, we were able to, with these new electric vans, double the passenger capacity, even when transporting a disabled passenger. And that's real critical. On the minivan, they are ADA accessible, but it takes up like 3 spots for ambulatory passengers. With these new vans, we actually can transport more with a disabled person. And all in all, maximizing our current incentives to reduce the cost of the vehicle to bring it comparable to conventional vehicles. This project, each vehicle costs us around $82,000, and our minivan true cost, minivans were right around $50,000. So we'll jump in. The next slide actually is a portfolio of the city's low carbon fuel standard program. When you start to really get into this area, hopefully the LCFS sticks around, but with the number of vehicles that the city is now deploying and the charging stations and the renewable energy that they've added to each of their facilities, the net value of this program is huge, potentially generating $500,000 annually, and which equates to 29 cents a kilowatt. Those are big numbers, and really you look at that and say, yes, we can operate electric vehicles, actually operate them and make money at the same time. It should be noted that additional benefits and revenue of installing solar when constructing your charging facilities should be considered. Without that, you may be having to purchase RECs if you aren't producing the solar energy yourself. So next slide. I've had the opportunity to share our electric experience many times over the last couple of years, and most of the questions I get are all focused around, Rich, tell me how much it costs. And I absolutely happy to share that. You know, I would say, hey, you can do it. Right now is the perfect time to do this, to deploy electric vehicles and the infrastructure. Everyone is playing together, but it's difficult. It's going to take some time, but you can get through it. So the next couple of slides I'll be sharing with you, those answers to the questions of how much it costs. So when we look at these electric vans, I'll be honest, I'll share with you, in 2019 is when we purchased them. The cost per vehicle was $171,000, but with incentives here in the state of California, dramatically reduced the cost of the vehicle. $80,000 from Air Resources Board HVIP voucher. Our local air district had some incentives to reduce the cost. All in all, when you get down to it, it's getting pretty close, price comparable to that gasoline powered minivan. Let's take a look in the next slide. We're going to take a look at the infrastructure. And today we do have the utility providers on the call, and they're the stars of this program, because without them, actually for the city of Porterville's case, and I think for many other transit properties, without the support and the help from the utility provider, I think we would still be trying to design this infrastructure in-house and going through all those struggles. And so it was been incredibly beneficial to partner with our utility provider, which in our case was Southern California Edison and their Charge Ready Transport. You can look at that the chart on to the right. All of the utility upgrades were provided by our utility provider. 80% of the construction work outside of the utility upgrades, essentially from the disconnect moving forward, plus the solar and the shade structure that was funded 80% through the federal grants. The local match was actually provided by the grants from our local air district. The charging station equipment, 50% of it was paid by the utility provider, and the other 50% was paid by our local air district. So in the end, we had $1 million project, 12 DC fast chargers supporting our 12 electric vans. We had a 50 kilowatt solar system on top of our shade structure at no cost to the city of Porterville. That's pretty exciting stuff, and you can still do it today. This is what's probably neat about this webinar. So next slide. I've listed some here on the screen, some lessons learned regarding infrastructure, but our utility providers are going to go through a lot of this information. I think the main point that I'd like to stress is that you need to start with the infrastructure first. It takes a long time, and you don't want to have your vehicle sitting around without a place to charge. I like to look at the utility provider and all their exciting programs as like energy efficiency partnerships. They're really here from the very beginning all the way through the end to ensure that they're providing and you're accessing efficient energy to power your fleet. So next slide, I just have a couple information. It's important to note that much of the success of transport's on-demand service was the improvements that were driven by the community. Improvements such as increased capacity and reliability, a trusted partner such as Uber, who has a global brand, and that's exciting to be able to partner with Uber to purchase the rights of their software. But we operate the service with our vehicles. It's not one of a kind. We were the third or fourth agency to be able to do this, but for a small agency to take a global brand and to have our service on there is, I think, one of the another key to success, and it really helped out our marketing. And last, the ability to plan and pay for your trip, all within the same app, were some of the community-driven improvements. We'll go to the next slide. With a focus on providing reliable and sustainable public transportation, data-driven operations is critical. And Tim shared with a couple slides of the analytics that Lightning provides. It really has helped our staff make better operational decisions and planning for that next day. We were able to quickly identify our vehicle uptime and how the vehicles are being utilized, what is our average mile per kilowatt, and the effect of temperature has and the operator has on range. So they've been really, their data that they provide to us in real time is critical for making our operations successful. Next slide is, we also, this project, we partnered with another vendor called Vericity to provide us additional real-time information, and they have the ability to monitor our charging stations, as well as a couple monitoring points for our vehicles. But with the telematics from the Lightning and Vericity, our staff has really a total picture of what's happening. They're able to look at what the trip manifests for the day on Uber and plan out strategically when is the best time to opportunity charge these vehicles. Could an extra 15-minute break provide critical extension of range to keep that vehicle running throughout the day? Those are some of the decisions that our staff is using every day. The decisions that they're making every day to ensure that at the end of the day, we're operating 100% zero-emission fleet at peak performance. So let's take a look at the performance of on-demand operated by an electric fleet. So in these next couple of slides, I mentioned that the service is super popular. 3,500 trips in a small community a month that's pretty good. It turns out that on-demand shared ride service is the preferred mode of transportation even during the pandemic. And many of the improvements to the service has been realized through the partnership with Uber. But through all this, operating it with battery electric vehicles and the challenges that comes with that, and planning for when to charge, trip volume has remained consistent even with all of these challenges. And we now have a new variant, and you never know if one day this store is going to be open or it's going to be shut. But really consistent trip volume even through all of this. It's something to say and to be proud of. In the next slide, embracing data-driven operations has allowed the service to operate at a high level. Driver utilization averages over 70% and is averaging more than 3 trips per revenue hour. Next slide. I think this is actually my last slide, so we can get into the good stuff, the infrastructure from the utility providers. With an all-electric on-demand service, there has been improved mobility in the Porterville community. Transitioning to an all-electric fleet has been a little challenging, but very rewarding in the end. With current incentives and grant opportunity, there is no better time. The city of Porterville is providing clean and innovative mobility to its residents, and at the same time generating revenue and reducing its operating costs. Reliability and the rider experience has been resilient, with an average trip arrivals between 10 and 13 minutes on weekdays and less than 10 minutes on weekends. So thank you all for allowing me to share our electric experience, and I hope you guys have a good day.
Thank you, Richard, for that very interesting presentation. Hello, everyone. I am now going to cut in with my presentation and give you an overview of the Charge Ready Transport Program with Southern California Edison. We don't have a ton of time left, so some of these I'm going to have to go through pretty quickly, but I do want to remind you that we have breakout sessions after this webinar, so I would encourage all of you to join the breakout session for your respective utility company, and we're happy to do a deeper dive on any questions you have about these programs. Next slide, please. Okay, so Charge Ready Transport, very quickly. Some fast facts about the program. We are running through 2024. We have a significant budget for the program of $343 million. And primarily what the program is designed to do is build out make-ready infrastructure for our customers that are adopting medium and heavy-duty electric vehicles. There is also, as part of the program, potential rebates on the charging stations themselves as well. And there are special electric rates that are designed specifically for these types of vehicles. Next slide, please. Okay, so what type of vehicle would qualify for Charge Ready Transport? Well, really so many types of vehicles. Really, the main requirement is that the vehicle is 6,000 pounds or heavier, and that the vehicle is fully electric. And this even includes off-road equipment like forklifts, and it includes things like TRUs, transportation refrigeration units, as well. Next slide. So I mentioned that almost any vehicle qualifies that meets that weight threshold that's fully electric. The primary thing is you just need to make sure that your vehicle is able to charge with a charging station that's on our approved product list. And you can find that on our website, which is listed below. We have a lot of different options in terms of stations on that list, everything from level 2 charging to DC fast charging to chargers for TRUs and forklifts. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that charging hardware rebate of up to 50%. You can see on the right here the rebate caps for different power levels of stations, so like level 2 all the way through DC fast charging. And customers that qualify for that rebate would include any transit agencies or school districts. And then if you don't fall within that category, you could still qualify if your site is located in a disadvantaged community and your company is not on the Fortune 1000 list. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's 2 primary ways that you can participate in the program. The one that you see on screen is the, probably 90 or 95% of our customers go this route. And this is Edison built infrastructure. And what that means is that Edison's going to do the vast majority of the work. There's no rebate involved here because Edison is designing and building everything ourselves. And that includes everything to the left that's in green, that's on Edison's side of the meter. We would perform those upgrades. And then everything on the right of the dotted line that's in green, Edison performs those upgrades as well. And then the only items the customer is going to be responsible for is purchasing the charging stations and then hiring a third party to connect those stations to the stub out of the make ready that we've provided. Next slide, please. Okay, the second way you can participate is called the customer build option. And in this, everything that's green on Edison's side of the meter, we are still going to take care of that for you. But everything in yellow on the screen is the customer's responsibility. So everything from panel upgrades to trenching to running conduit through the parking lot, engineering drawings, permits through the city. In this scenario, you, the customer, are taking care of all that, and then Edison would rebate you 80% of the cost. And it's important to note that when we say you would get a rebate of 80% of the cost, that's 80% of what Edison thinks it would have cost if we were to perform the work. So keep in mind, we're not just writing you a blank check for 80% of whatever you like. It's 80% of basically what we think is reasonable on that project. Next slide. Okay, I mentioned our new EV rates. And I'm not going to go into details on this, but one of the best things about these rates right now is there's no demand charges through 2024. And even after that, the demand charges only go up by 20% per year until they hit the market rate, which would happen in 2029. So I think the takeaway here is that you'd be receiving steep discounts on demand charges all the way up until 2029. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are the steps in the program? The first step is develop the project. So that's simply, you're evaluating if electrification is right for you, talking to myself or someone else on the team to help you explore if transport is a good program for you to utilize. If you decide you want to move forward, we help you submit an application. Typically it takes about an hour-long call, and we'll help you through that. Then we move on to the design and build portion, and then we move into operation and maintenance. Next slide, please. Okay, this one's super important. So what are the obligations for participants in the program? The first one is the program participation agreement. So you'll have to sign a contract and agree to some terms and conditions. You will need to, within 45 days of signing that contract, submit a proof of order for vehicles and charging equipment. You'll have to sign a property easement with SCE. I know to some of you out there that might sound a little scary. You're thinking, oh my gosh, an easement on my property. This is just generally a few feet around any infrastructure that we put in, and it's simply so that we have access to maintain that infrastructure because we will be responsible for maintaining it. We would require that you provide usage data. So the stations just need to report back how much they're using, but there's no requirement on how much they need to use. We just want to know what they're consuming. The chargers need to be operational for a period of 10 years. And then we ask that you submit a vehicle acquisition plan when you apply for the program. Next slide, please. Okay, how do you know if you're ready to apply? So, there's 4 items here, and they're all important. So we need to know, have you identified your site yet? That's the most important because we're putting infrastructure at that site potentially. You need to identify vehicle information. So how many vehicles and what type of vehicles. Information on the charging stations you want to use is helpful. And then also, what are your future deployment plans? And that's going to be important because if you are planning on, for instance, in the next year purchasing 5 vehicles, but then in 3 years after that you want another 10, if you're willing to commit to those future vehicle purchases, we can build out all that infrastructure for you at the same time. So these are all really good to have if you're ready to apply. But I would say, we could let you apply if you just have the first two items, which would be information on the site and information on your vehicles. Next slide, please. Okay, so that wraps up this portion. And just a reminder, we can go into much deeper dive in the breakout rooms. And now I'm going to transition over to Tim O'Neill, who's an account executive with PG&E. Tim, take it away.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate that. Morning, folks. Thanks for joining us on this and getting this information. I've really been enjoying hearing from Porterville. Even though that was an SCE project, we have similar projects going on PG&E service territory, and we're just as excited about those. So congratulations, Porterville and SCE, for that wonderful job. So I'm going to be covering the program EV Fleet, which is PG&E's medium heavy-duty fleet program, similar to what Jason covered and what Lianna is going to cover with the San Diego program. Normally, we take about 20 minutes and cover this with customers. I will say that this is just a snippet, so if you do want information more specific about your project, definitely go to pge.forward/EV Fleet, submit an interest form. There's a button right there, and one of the onboarding specialists, similar to myself, will contact you and we'll discuss your project specifically. But I'll run through this one real quick just to give you a taste. Next slide, please. So the EV Fleet program, it's a 5-year program. You're going to see some similarities between SCE, San Diego Gas and Electric, and our program, PG&E's, and there'll be some differences, but our program runs through the end of 2024. What that means, important for the customer, is that whatever you're going to put into service, as Jason mentioned for the SCE, is if you're going to put into service 2 vehicles per year through the end of 2024, we can actually design and build out your charging infrastructure for all 8 charging stations, not just the first 2 for the first year. So that's really important for customers to know that the end date is end of 2024. We're going to partner with 700 customer sites, getting 6,500 newer converted medium and heavy duty fleet vehicles on the road. Next slide, please. This is just going to be a snapshot of what you're going to see. The top part of the pie is our on-road vehicles qualifying for the program. This is not all-inclusive. You don't see refuse trucks and other stuff on there, but they do qualify. The important thing here is that the vehicles, on-road vehicles, are over 6,000 pound gross vehicle weight. That puts them in the medium heavy-duty fleet, heavy-duty category, not the light-duty. We had a separate program for the light-duty charging station. So this is only for vehicles that are over 6,000 pound gross vehicle weight. Or in the bottom part of the pie, you're going to see in blue, that's off-road. So as you saw before with Jason mentioning that TRUs, transport refrigeration units, support equipment for truck stops and ports and airports, those also qualify, as does forklifts. There is not a minimum requirement for the gross vehicle weight rating on that one, and so those also qualify for the program. So lots of vehicles that we can participate in the program. Next slide, please. This is the bulk of what we're going to talk about. And when we look at a customer's charging infrastructure, we break it into 3 sections. The section there in green off to the left is what we call TTM, stands for to the meter. This equipment, normally customers have to pay for these upgrades, but all of this is covered free of charge to the customer through the EV Fleet program. It includes the distribution pole off the property, the service drop, transformer you see there with the 3 yellow insulators, and TTM also includes all of the trenching, conduit, and conductor from the transformer over to your new meter panel, hopefully near your charging stations. Makes it easier on the customer. So that's TTM. PG&E covers all of the design, build, and financing of it. So we take care of everything. The next section there in blue is called BTM. That stands for behind the meter. Now, this is the customer's responsibility to purchase and install with your BTM contractor. This includes the new meter panel, your breakers and switchgear, and BTM also includes the trenching, conduit, and conductor from the meter panel over to the base of your charging stations. Now, even though this is the customer's responsibility to purchase and install, we will guide you through that, and we will also pay you what's called a BTM incentive. If you look in the lower right-hand box, that's how we calculate it. It's based upon the types of vehicles and how many vehicles you're committing to putting in operation through the end of 2024. Example, if you have school buses, you're going to see in the bottom block, you get a credit of $4,000 per school bus. A school that's putting in, make my math easy, 10 school buses through the end of 2024, 10 buses times $4,000, we will commit to paying the school a BTM incentive check of $40,000 to help them offset the cost of that. Again, similar to SCE's, program, we max that out at 80% of your total cost. You can stack those with the grants that you heard mentioned by Tim and Jason earlier, and Richard. So those are really great tools to be able to stack and to be able to get your project. As you saw, Porterville, whole project was done for $0. We have a lot of customers in our program that are experiencing the similar financial benefits of that. So really good. So the third and final part of the charging infrastructure there you see there in orange is your charging station. And some customers will qualify for a charger rebate in addition to the BTM incentive. And you'll see there, similar to SEs, we have we give charger rebates to all schools, transit agencies, and any other customer that's inside of a disadvantaged community in California. If you don't know if you're in a disadvantaged community or not, don't worry. If you're a PG&E electric paying customer, when you submit that EV fleet, that interest form, and an onboarding specialist contacts you, we'll be able to verify if you're in a DAC, what you qualify for, what you don't qualify for. So we'll help you work through that. And there's some limitations. Again, 50% of the cost of the charger is the limit of the rebate that we pay. And you do have to use a charger that's on the approved vendor list. And we do a partnership. So if you see it on SCE's list, we still will accept that as same as if it was on PG&E's approved vendor list. And there's a link also on our website that shows you that list as well. So very simple to run through. So that's it as a nutshell for that page. Next slide, please. I'm going to run through these really quick. What do we need from customers when they participate? Very similar to what you're going to see from the other utilities. We ask that you demonstrate your commitment by putting into service 2 electric vehicles right now. We ask that you demonstrate your long-term plan. That's that 4-year plan that we're asking about. We call it a deployment schedule. How many vehicles and how many charging stations of what size you're going to put into service each year, 2021, 22, 23, 24. And then in the bottom right, you're going to see that we ask that customers own or lease the property where the chargers are being installed for obvious reasons, and that they agree to operate and maintain the vehicles and the charging stations for a minimum of 10 years. And then you see in the bottom right, even though it's nothing that you're going to have to do, because this is a state program and the California PUC has asked that we report the charger usage data back to them. We will be doing that on your behalf, but we always want to let customers know that we will be reporting your charger usage data back to the CPUC for a minimum of 5 years. Again, nothing that you have to do. You'll grant us access to the charger usage data, or we'll pull the data off of your new electric meter serving your charging stations and do it that way. Next slide, please. Now, we can't just let anybody apply for the program, because you're going to see that really very soon after you submit your application, we're going to put real dollars and man hour or person powers into the program to where we can't do this just for anybody who's just curious. So number one, you have to have what I call a golden ticket to participate in the program. Golden ticket is simply you have an approved vehicle grant from an air district or the California Energy Commission or somebody like that that's for your vehicles, or you have a paid invoice. And we have some customers that are ordering vehicles from Lightning Motors directly, and they're just showing us that they have the paid invoice, they've ordered them, vehicles are coming, and they have their golden ticket. At that point, similar to what Jason mentioned, we need to know that number one, you know where you want to put your charging stations, not just the address, but where, because you're going to see that the design team is going to come out and they're going to ask you, where would you like your charging stations? You're going to say, oh, up there against that fence line. We're going to have 4 of them, 19 kW charging stations, blah, blah, blah. So you need to know that information before you submit your application. And again, your onboarding specialist can help you walk through all of that and get all of that ready. Afterwards, of course, you do need to know that you may have some out-of-pocket BTM costs to pay. That can be covered by grants, and again, stacked with ours and be down to 0, not a problem. And we ask that you have leadership approval on board. We want all decision makers on board. What we don't want to happen is we get a design together, we put you a contract, you send it out, and somebody, CFO or somebody says no, kibosh the whole thing. So we ask that you have all your decision makers on board, and we'll do an intro call very similar to what you're going through here with your team and answering their questions. Next slide, please. This is, it's just the roadmap you're going to go through, and I'm going to do this really quick due to timing. But number one, you're ready to go. You submit your EV fleet application off to the left-hand side. You're going to see that there's 2 phases. The first phase of the EV fleet program is called preliminary design phase. It takes about 3 to 5 months. When you submit your EV fleet application, number one, you're going to see that very quickly we're going to hire an engineering design firm to your project. They're going to contact you, 2, 3, 4 sections in there, the bottom part of that. They're going to come out. They're going to ask you those questions that I mentioned. Where do you want your charging stations? How many? Blah, blah, blah. They're also going to take a look at your on-site transformer, make sure we have enough room to bring in the conduits for that new meter panel that you're going to set up for your charging stations. They're going to put the design together. It takes them about 2 weeks. Then they're going to submit it back to PG&E number 5. PG&E is going to go through the approval process. We do approval calls once a week. Bring in all the projects from the previous week, go through them. They're going to take a look at yours. Once everybody gives thumbs up, sounds good, we're going to put your contract together there, number 6. It'll have your terms and conditions. It'll have all of the rebates and incentives that, backslide, please. And then what you're going to do is, number 6, once you sign the contract and return it, at that point, we're going to move you to the other side of the orange line. You'll be in the final design and execution stage. That will be, it takes about 6 to 8 months. You're going to be given a project manager. They're going to walk through this whole side with you. Basically, they're going to work with your BTM contractor to make sure they're getting all their work done. They're going to work with the PG&E crews to make sure all the TTM work is done. Number 13, hopefully in 6 months, they'll have everything done. BTM contractor will have everything done, and they will energize your new meter panel. Number 14, you'll energize your charging stations. You'll be off and running, and then you can submit back to PG&E any paid invoices so that we can pay you back your incentives and rebates. Next slide, please. The only other thing I'm going to give you as a bonus item is similar to what Jason mentioned on SEs, is we have a business electric vehicle charging rate. I'm not going to cover a lot of stuff about that right now, but just know that the average customer should receive about a 25% discount on their electricity. You might receive more if you can take advantage of the super off peak time zone of charging, and or you may only see 20% savings from the if you have to do charging during the peak. That's okay. Again, onboarding specialists can help you walk you through that. The awesome news is what you heard from Tim and Richard was in Porterville was the fact that the additional savings of going to electric as a fuel savings was huge. So next slide, please. And that's it for me. I appreciate your time on this. And again, definitely you can reach out to me at the email address, or you can go on to PG&E's EV Fleet website. You can submit an interest form, and we'll be more than happy to have somebody get a hold of you within a day or two and basically just talk about your specific project. I think up next is Lianna Rios with San Diego Gas and Electric, and we'll hand it over to her. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Tim. Good afternoon, everyone. Lianna Rios with SDG&E, Clean Transportation Team. So thank you, Tim and Jason, for your excellent presentations. And Richard, it's really good to be in the company of Central Valley peeps. I grew up there, so very near and dear here, doing some great work there. All right, since I have a whole whopping 1 more minute left, let's jump right into this. Next slide, please. So SDG&E's Power Your Drive for Fleets program is modeled after SCE's and PG&E's programs. So what I'm going to do is just dig into some of the primary differences. Next slide, please. All right, the scale of our program is significantly less because we're the little utility down south in Southern California. But essentially, our Power Your Drive for Fleets program provides the make-ready charging infrastructure to serve medium and heavy-duty fleets, very similar to our IOU counterparts to the north. The primary difference on program requirements is that, yes, there's a 2 electric vehicle minimum, but we're really interested in having a dialogue and a discussion about your longer-term vehicle acquisition plan over a 10-year period. If we're going to go in and make these improvements, sometimes significant improvements to the infrastructure, we want to go in and do it once. Next slide, please. All right, the big takeaway for this slide really is, I'm not going to go through every step here, but the big takeaway is it takes 11 to 16 months to go through our program, from the time that a customer submits to the interest list, submits their application, to the time that you can have the make-ready charging infrastructure ready and begin charging your vehicles. So the big takeaway here is, please let us know if you're thinking or considering about electrifying your fleet. Contact us early and let's communicate often. That was the big takeaway. I attended the ACT Expo in Long Beach a couple weeks ago, and that was the big takeaway that I heard over and over with every single speaker, is contact your utility early. The worst case scenario is we would not want our customers to have their vehicles delivered and not have a way to charge them. So let's start these discussions often. And you can do that by submitting to the interest list. Next slide, please. All right, we're going to dig into some of the rates and incentives. Next slide. So very similar to our IOU counterparts is we have a special EV rate. It is called the EVHP rate, Electric Vehicle High Power Rate, and we will begin offering this in beginning of Q1 of next year. So this essentially, the benefits of this rate is that it replaces demand charges with a subscription pricing plan. And it does require that the EV loads charge on a dedicated meter to take advantage of the benefit of this rate. Now, PG&E and SCE's program, they got their programs approved about a year prior to SDG&E. So we're really looking to them for the best practices and lessons learned. They're taking all the hard knocks first. Thank you very much. But we're learning a lot from them because they are out front. So we're almost a year into our first year of implementation. We have one site that has been constructed through the program, and we have more on deck to be constructed through Q4 of this year. There are some varying TOU rates depending on when you use your energy on this rate. There's a large differential between using energy on peak versus off peak. So certainly charging off peak is beneficial, and many of our fleet operators in some of the modeling that we've done and cost analyses that we've done have benefited significantly by going on this rate. Next slide, please. I would be remiss if I didn't discuss the low carbon fuel standard. I think Richard did a fantastic job of highlighting the benefits for the city of Porterville and their program. Long story short, this LCFS program benefits clean energy producers, and users can earn this revenue from this sale. So the beneficiaries are essentially the clean energy producers and users, including electric fleets. And this can be significant, as Richard had demonstrated. I think it was $195 per LCFS credit, which in many cases can help purchase more electric vehicles, charging infrastructure purchases, cover maintenance costs, and essentially all of your fuel costs. So with that, next slide, please. I want to thank you very much for these couple of minutes and invite you all, those who are deploying electric vehicles in SDG&E's service territory, to please join the breakout. If you're considering electrifying your fleet, please submit to our interest list. Let us know who you are, and I will put a customer solutions advisor in contact with you right away. Thank you so much, and I'm going to hand it back over to Jason.
Thanks, Lianna. Great presentation. So we are out of time, so we're going to wrap up the webinar here. I just want to mention again that there are links to the breakout rooms for Q&A, with each of the respective utilities that were on here today. So I encourage you to go over there to speak to us about any questions you have about fleet electrification. Also, look out for the follow-up email with the recorded link this week to the webinar. And please fill out the quick 30-second survey that will pop up as you exit the webinar today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and have a fantastic day. Bye.